Okay, so from our previous slide, the DB Cooper case, there is a video that connects to that story as well. So our two cases before were criminal, but this case is a non-crime story. It's about a military disappearance, and it talks about something called the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle is a area of ocean off the coast of Florida where, for some reason, there have been many shipwrecks, ship sinkings, ship disappearances, ships found without a crew, lost airplanes, flights, all of that sort of thing, and for hundreds of years. So it's a very unique place off the coast of Florida in a triangle from Florida to Cuba to Bermuda. So within that triangle, there's a lot of strange things going on. Okay, so this is called a mystery Flight 19, and this is from an article, Flight 19 Disappearance, the Most Likely Cause, by Jim R. from historicmysteries.com. So Flight 19 was a group of aircraft that mysteriously went missing off the coast of Florida in 1945. On December 5th, shortly after 2 in the afternoon, 5 General Motors TBF Avenger torpedo bombers and all 14 men aboard disappeared during a training mission over the Atlantic Ocean. Their unexplained vanishing and proximity to the fabled Bermuda Triangle has led to multiple theories as to their ultimate fate. A few Grumman TBF-1 Avengers from escorting Scout Squadron 29, based out of Norfolk, Virginia in 1942. Okay, so Flight 19 mission. World War II was the first war that involved extensive air combat. Thousands of new planes had to be built, and thousands of pilots needed the training to fly them. Flying heavier than air aircraft was an inherently dangerous activity. Future generations of combat pilots would learn from the first generation sacrifices. Fatal accidents were common. Pilots were nearly as likely to die in training as they were in combat. In Britain, many died in training. In America, as well. Any combination of mechanical failure, bad weather, and human error could doom any pilot, no matter how experienced. When the mission started on the afternoon of December 5th, 1945, about 7 months after the war ended, it was supposed to be a routine training exercise, but in reality, there was no such thing. The plan was to take off from Fort Lauderdale in Florida and fly in a triangular pattern. It was supposed to be a practice navigation exercise and bombing run. They would start by flying east, drop their bombs at the Hen and Chicken Shoals, and continue for a total of 140 nautical miles. At that point, they would turn left and fly 73 nautical miles north to an area near the Bahamas. Finally, they would turn left and fly another 140 miles back to Fort Lauderdale. All the bombers had crews of 3 Navy or Marine pilots, except for one which had 2 crew members. The flight leader was Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a veteran combat pilot who had flown missions in the Pacific Theater. Nearly every member of the mission had logged over 200 hours of flying experience. All of them understood the risks. From 2:10 p.m. to 3:40 p.m., Flight 19 took off around 2:10 and proceeded to Hen and Chicken Shoals, where they dropped their practice bombs without incident. But then, somewhere over the Atlantic, bad weather, possibly, meteorologists tracked a massive storm traveling from Georgia south to Miami that day, generating hurricane-force winds at 8,000 feet. Flight instructor Lieutenant Robert F. Cox, in another flight in the area, overheard many of Flight 19's final radio transmissions. At some point, the storm deteriorated or disoriented the aircraft, and they became lost. At 3:40, Lieutenant Taylor radioed in a distress call, reporting a malfunctioning compass, and they lost their way. So, one of the things about the Bermuda Triangle is this malfunctioning of compasses. The article goes on to say, "I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down. I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale." Lieutenant Taylor was mistaken about being in the Florida Keys. Instead, they were over 200 miles north. Some have speculated that Taylor, who recently transferred to Florida, may have been unfamiliar with the geography. At this time, when American pilots flying over the Atlantic became lost, the protocol was to turn their plane west towards the setting sun and fly until they eventually reached land. The problem was Lieutenant Taylor had become so disoriented that he believed he was at the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico. Flying west, Taylor thought would have put them further over the Gulf instead of turning left and flying west back to Fort Lauderdale. Lieutenant Taylor ordered his men to continue flying east, putting them further out over the open ocean. The last known location was 75 miles off the coast of Coca, Florida. 6 p.m. Lieutenant Cox overheard the men arguing with each other about which direction to go. Around 6 p.m., Lieutenant Taylor's men persuaded him to finally turn around and head west. Shortly later, he reversed course and resumed heading east. Investigators later speculated that one of the planes in Flight 19 might have broken off and flown in another direction, but most followed their commander's orders. As the sun began to set, Lieutenant Taylor ordered his men to begin preparing for a water landing. All planes close up tight, Lieutenant Taylor said. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. After several minutes of silence, Lieutenant Taylor frantically calls, "We can't tell where we are. Everything is blank. Can't make out anything. We think we may be about 225 miles northwest of base. It looks like we're entering white water. We're completely lost." Search and there was no, that was their final radio transmission. Okay, so in that event, they send out a search and rescue plane. Lieutenant Cox wanted to search for the planes, but he received orders to return to base. Shortly after Lieutenant Taylor's final transmission around 7:30 p.m., NAS Fort Lauderdale scrambled two PBM Mariner flying boat rescue planes to search for the missing bombers. So these are planes that are able to land on the water. A Martin PBM-5 Mariner was used, and it had a reputation of being notoriously accident-prone. Not good. The airmen nicknamed it the flying gas tank for its tendency to explode. Almost immediately, one of the PBM Mariners vanished, along with its 13 crew members. The next day, the U.S. Navy, Coast Guard, and Naval Aviation personnel sent over 300 planes and boats on a search and rescue mission. They scoured an area of around 250,000 square miles, but found no sign of the missing men, not even an oil slick. Including the PBM Mariner crew, 27 men lost their lives. The investigation. A committee investigation followed, and months later, the Navy published a report of its findings. The committee established many of Flight 19's true location versus where Lieutenant Taylor believed them to be. Most likely, Taylor mistook the Bahamas for the Florida Keys, which is much further south. Ironically, the aircraft's actual location was much closer to where it was supposed to be than where Taylor believed. Initial investigators attributed the accident to mechanical failure caused by the malfunctioning compass. Even though Taylor wasn't found at fault, his mother later successfully petitioned the cause to be changed to unknown, since the Navy hadn't recovered any wreckage or bodies. Some alternative theories. The disappearance of Flight 19 was considered a somewhat mysterious tragedy until 1964. Author Vincent Gaddis published an article about the doomed flight in a sci-fi magazine, Argosy. The Bermuda Triangle stretches from Miami to San Juan, Puerto Rico to Bermuda. In the article, Gaddis argued that the plane disappeared in a region with an unusually high number of air and water accidents, the Bermuda Triangle. Even though that region of the ocean is nowhere different than anywhere else globally, the theory inspired generations of conspiracy theorists. Actually, there's another area in the Pacific with that same kind of anomaly. Over the years, people have speculated the disappearance was caused by anything from interference from the Earth's magnetic field to parallel dimensions to alien abductions. The 1977 film Close Encounters of the Third Kind even depicted a flying saucer abducting the planes and crew and teleporting them to the Mexican desert. High speculation. Aficionados have also continued the search for the aircraft. In 1990, John Maher believed he discovered one of the planes on the ocean floor 390 feet below the surface. A year later, Graham Hawkes claimed to have found all 5 aircraft. Both were mistaken. While they did find World War II area bombers, they were unrelated to the disappearance of Flight 19. And considering how dangerous aviation was during this period, 1940s plane wreckage off Florida's coast isn't surprising. Okay, so far they have never found any of the planes, any of the men, and it is another historic disappearance case for the military. And we have a video connected to this story as well. So we'll move on to our next slide from here.